Sports Talk Chicago. Here with Jon Zaghloul, and we are back and ready for today's special guest. He's the former president of the Miami Marlins, the host of Nothing Personal on the CBS Sports Podcast Network. Please welcome David Samson to the program. David, it's great to have you on. How are you?
I'm doing great. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for being here. Wanted to start with the White Sox. How do you explain what happened to them this October?
Oh, I think it's amazingly easy to explain. All season long, they did a great job of beating up on the AL Central, and that's how they won their division. But remember, the AL Central was mediocre at best, and they just had a hard time winning games against good teams. And while good teams need to beat the bad teams, you also need to beat the good teams. And in the playoffs, it's only good teams. And they got hung out to dry when they started seeing better teams, and they just lost. So I think it's easy to explain, but I think that anyone inside the White Sox organization saw the first round exit coming.
Who's to blame for their loss? What went wrong?
You know, it's funny. Everyone wants to assign blame. When I ran a team for 18 years, I would try to find blame, and I would blame managers, or if I had to, GMs. I'd blame anyone but myself, of course. Sometimes the truth is there's no one to blame. Sometimes you put a team together and it just doesn't all hit right. And if you look at it, someone like the Giants, that's the dream. What happened to the San Francisco Giants this year, where you've got 5 or 6 guys who have career years, and every pitcher overperforms, every player outperforms their contract, and it just keeps going, and you expect it to stop, but then you win more games and win more games, and before you know it, you've won 107 games. You know, winning 93 games. I think the White Sox won 93 games. That's a good regular season. So I really don't think there's anyone to blame. As much as I'd like to blame Tony La Russa, I can't do it.
Why can't you? I mean, like, how did you evaluate his performance as a manager?
Well, I'll tell you, good managers can make a good team great. Bad managers cannot make a great team bad. I feel as though Tony La Russa was hired for a particular reason by Jerry Reinsdorf that involved personal relationships and a desire by Jerry to sort of go full circle in his career as owner of the White Sox. I think that he'll look back on this season and be pleased, but the reality is there were some clubhouse issues there. The way he called out his players was something that you don't normally see and you don't want to see. I understand the old school versus new school nature. And listen, I'm a boomer, so I get old school. But I don't want to say the game has passed Tony by, but because that's not accurate. But what I do know is that it's not easy to relate to today's players, and it's not about age. So it's not that Tony's too old. It's just it takes a certain type of personality to understand the way these players think and the way they want to be treated and need to be treated to get the best out of them. And he did a great job to get 93 wins out of this team. But some people would say that they underperformed because they couldn't beat the bad teams. But I did not get anything out of Tony that I wouldn't have expected when the season started.
Do you think he's the right manager to lead this team to a World Series?
I think the better question I'd like to ask is, are Kenny Williams and Rick Hahn the right people to get the right pieces in place to take the next step? And that's going to require an investment by the White Sox, because when you look around at that team, they need, if you look at the playoff teams this year, they need some better arms. And to get better arms, you need better scouting. And I'm certainly not impugning the ability of the White Sox scouts or anybody on that staff. But it doesn't take a genius to sign the best free agent, right? It doesn't take a genius to say, hey, let's go get Marcus Semien or let's sign Carlos Correa, right? It takes a good, smart baseball person to find people who are making 5 million or 8 million or 10 million who play like they're making 30. Because when you sign a player who's making 20 or 30, it's very hard for them to be as good as the size of their contract.
David Samson, here on Sports Talk Chicago. David, which players from the White Sox impressed you this year?
You know, I keep waiting for Jose Abreu to not be good, because I can't believe that he continues to do it year after year. So I keep saying, I think this was my 3rd year in a row of saying that's it. He's probably past his prime. And then all of a sudden he just continues to hit and hit. I think that what disappointed me was some of the pitching. I felt as though Keuchel was the hope was that he would be able to be different than he was. I thought that Lucas would have an ability to be a Cy Young candidate again. And they did not have bad years, don't get me wrong. But to win a ring in October, again, you need superb performances in places where you both expect it and don't expect it. And I'm not sure that the White Sox got that from anybody.
What do you think of Craig Kimbrell?
I get what you're doing, right? You want to shorten the game. The Yankees did it when they signed Zach Britton or Aroldis Chapman. You want to just lock down and tell your starters, you go 7 and we'll take care of 8 and 9. But then somewhere along the line, starters started going 3 or 4 innings. I think that having 2 closers in the back is fine. Obviously, when they signed Hendricks and you get Kimbrel, your view is that you've made a move that is really going to help your team. And we made a similar move in 03 when we traded for Urbina in the middle of the season and paired him up with Looper and thought that that would be lights out. But it turns out they blew a bunch of saves in the playoffs, and we needed our starters to pitch in the bullpen just like every other October team. So there's really no way to know what's going to work. You just have to try, and you cannot say the White Sox didn't try.
If you were a GM, would you bite at Kimbrel? I know his option's going to be up. What do you think?
No, I would not. I'm looking at where I want to allocate payroll, and I think it would be far more impactful. They already spent money on Hendricks. I would put my money at shortstop.
Do you think the Sox end up making a big move there? Do you think Correa or Simeon could be on the table for them?
I think Jerry's really the owner. Jerry Reinsdorf really has to think about what he wants to do with his payroll. It's not like he's, with a $60 million payroll. He is spending money. There's no doubt about that. And he has to decide, is he okay with 05 and having one championship? And the answer is no, because when we won in 03, I spent the next 14 years trying to win the second one, because there's only one thing better than winning your first ring, and that's getting your second one. And you feel like you're chasing until you get it. And when you're older, and Jerry's an octogenarian now, you think to yourself, is how many years do I have left where I can enjoy this team? Do I just do it right now? The value of the team has gone up so much. Do I just give away short-term profitability with an attempt to maybe get myself a championship? And I can't tell you what's inside his head, other than, as well as I know Jerry, I know how competitive he is. And I know he'd love his tally to be 6-2 Bulls, White Sox, not 6-1.
David Samson here on Sports Talk Chicago. David, let's talk Cubs now. What do you make of Carter Hawkins as the new GM hire?
So let me be clear to your audience. Carter Hawkins is not the GM of the Chicago Cubs. News alert. He is an assistant general manager. They gave him the title because that's how to get him out of Cleveland. And I was the king of this. We promoted AGMs to GMs and made our GM a president of baseball operations before it was something that was done by all teams. When we made Larry Beinfest the president of baseball operations in 2007. But what I can tell you, it may have been 07 or 08, but what I can tell you is that he was still the GM when he was president of baseball operations. Jed Hoyer is running that baseball organization, and Hawkins was brought in to assist him as an assistant GM, but with a bigger title. So it's not up to Carter Hawkins what players are going to be signed, what the offseason plan is going to be. That will be between Ricketts and Hoyer will have his top lieutenants around him, one of whom is now Carter Hawkins.
What do you think the Cubs' position is then entering free agency?
Well, Tom Ricketts has been pretty clear, right? And that their new mantra, which is the same mantra that every team says, so it's pretty boring for everyone to hear. We want to spend money intelligently. Well, we all say that, right? The only one who said the opposite was the owner of the Phillies, a guy named John Middleton, who said, if we need to spend stupid money, we'll do it. Well, guess what? They spent stupid money and they didn't make the playoffs. So we all want to spend money intelligently, but that's code for we're going to try as hard as we can not to overpay. If I'm the Chicago Cubs and I want to spend money intelligently, I'm going to stay away from the top of the market. I'm going to sign some short-term deals, some 2- and 3-year deals. I don't think I'm going to be in the market to get one of those shortstops and give a 10-year deal like what Lindor got from the Mets. I just don't see that happening right now with Ricketts and the Cubs.
I'm curious, what do you think of the fire sale back near the trade deadline?
So that word is a trigger word for me because I worked for the Marlins for so long. And I got accused of fire sales, even ones I didn't do. There was a fire sale in 1998 and 97. I wasn't with the team till 02 in Florida. And then we traded out the players in 05 and again in 2012. The Cubs did not have a fire sale. They traded Rizzo, Baez, Bryant, Kimbrel. These guys were not as good as the name on their uniform or the stats on the back of their baseball card. Now, Bryant had a bit of a resurgence with San Francisco. Baez was Baez, even with the Mets. And Kimbrel was Kimbrel. Rizzo will get you some power from the left side. Nice for the porch in right field at Yankee Stadium. But it's not like Hoyer broke up the 27 Yankees, for crying out loud. Now, they are great names from the 2016 championship. They are names that, Rizzo, Baez, Bryant, that Cubs fans love and they feel this emotional attachment to. But to be a good GM, you cannot have an emotional attachment. You have to trade players a year too early, not a year too late. That's what the Tampa Bay Rays do. That's why the Rays are successful. And what the Cubs did was very, very smart.
When do you see them getting back to normal and being competitive?
That's really up to the revenue in Wrigleyville. I think that people are underestimating. It doesn't matter how rich your owner is or how many billions your owner is worth. Nobody wants to lose money. And Ricketts put a lot of money into Wrigley Field. He put a lot of money into Wrigleyville. And COVID really did impact his revenue and his ability to pay debt for the money that he borrowed to invest in these properties. So he's got to get himself back to par, back to even. And I think the payroll is not going to skyrocket until that time comes. In addition, I'm not sure the team is ripe and ready for that big free agent signing. And Jed Hoyer said it himself. He said building a team through free agency is a prescription for disaster, but finishing a team through free agency has a way to help you win rings. But I do not believe the Cubs are at the point where they are finishing their team. I think they are building their team.
David Samson, still here on Sports Talk Chicago. David, a few more questions before we finish up. First off, how do you make a trade in Major League Baseball? Take me through it.
So we decide, let's say, do you want to talk during the season or off season?
Let's talk during the season.
So during the season, the first thing we decide is whether or not we are going to be buyers or sellers. And normally we're delusional, and we always say we're going to be buyers because no one wants to give up on a season. And so we always said if we're within 5 games of a wild card, we're going to make a trade and we're going to buy because we're going to be able to make a run. That was our magic number to both give out playoff tickets and start signing playoff tickets and to make trades. When you identify what you need and generally what you're looking for at the deadline are bullpen arms and another bat. Assuming no injury, that's what you're looking for. So you get your baseball people together and you make a list. You have on a board in front of you the 29 other teams, the 40-man roster of the 29 other teams, and you identify names for each team that you think will be helpful to you. Then you call each team and you ask whether or not those players are available and what it will take to secure those players. In the meantime, you are meeting with your player development people and you are making a list of your prospects who you're willing to trade. And it's not based on Baseball America or MLB.com. We have our own list of prospects in order. We have our own depth chart that we do. So we'll decide who we want to trade and who we're willing to trade. And then there's another column of we don't want to trade, but would if ... And the would if ... is when you get a player from another team who you do not expect to be available, but if made available, you would trade one of your would if players. So you go around from team to team and you write down what everybody's willing to do, what they have, and then you make your decision.
What's the biggest trade that didn't happen under your watch in Miami? One that was really close but didn't really end up working out.
Oh, I've talked about it, but it's the biggest one. Everybody wanted Giancarlo Stanton when he was still Mike Stanton, when he hadn't gotten to the big leagues yet. He was such a power bat in the minor leagues, and there was an offer to trade Manny Ramirez to us for Giancarlo Stanton when he was Mike Stanton, and we turned it down. We were offered Yasiel Puig often by the Dodgers, and they thought they would take advantage of us because they thought we'd think he'd be helpful to us as a Cuban in South Florida, and they wanted to pick off some of our young pitching. So we are always on the lookout for teams. We call them poachers. Poachers are GMs of other teams who will just make calls on a random Tuesday, trying to get one of your better prospects, thinking that you're not paying attention, or trying to get one of your players who's making some money, thinking that you have to cut payroll, and they offer you 10 cents on the dollar, thinking that they can poach the player, and you're always on the lookout for that.
When you see them call, do you just stop answering the phone? Like if you know they're a poacher?
You never stop answering the phone because you never know what could be on the other side of that phone call. Except now it turned into texts way more than calls.
Really?
GMs barely talk to each other anymore. It is all done via text. Back in the day, which makes me sound old, but back in the day, the winter meetings were used and the GM meetings were used as a time when GMs would be in the same room and not have to be on the phone because that's the only way they could ever be in contact. Now GMs are texting each other all the time back and forth. And there's really no need. You can FaceTime if you really want to see somebody's face, or you can just text. So the winter meetings and the GM meetings are not as valuable anymore as they used to be. So you always answer the phone, but mostly we are all dopamine fiends waiting for the ding on our phone.
Who do you always want for the Marlins that you never got?
Always wanted Will Middlebrooks, who I'm lucky enough to work with at CBS. He was a prospect for the Red Sox, and they would not trade him. And we loved him to play third base. He ended up getting injured and not having a long or sort of great career, but what a great guy. But he was untouchable. There's always players who are untouchable, and then they become touchable. We got a guy named Alfredo Amezaga. He was untouchable by the Anaheim Angels. And we had him as sort of a super utility guy. He could play outfield, play infield. We could not understand why he was an untouchable prospect. But that just goes to show why you have to speak to 29 teams, because your view of a player and another team's view of a player are so often different. That's why so few trades happen, because in order for a trade to happen, you have to have commonality of view between two teams on each of the players involved in a trade.
And David, before we finish up today, last question. How'd you survive the Boston Marathon this year?
So I did it with my best friend who has Parkinson's, and he has early onset Parkinson's. He's had it over a decade, and we've been running marathons together for 25 years, and he's not going to be able to run marathons for much longer. So we've raised almost $1 million to find a cure, because he needs a cure for Parkinson's, and there is no cure yet. It took us 6 hours and 53 minutes. And he is my hero. We walked plenty. We jogged a little bit. And he's also going to do the New York Marathon, as am I, on November 7th, all to raise money and find a cure. I love the Boston Marathon. The race director is a good friend named Dave McGilvery. The people of Boston are so outstanding. And this is coming from a New Yorker who can't stand Boston sports or Bostonians. And then I started doing the marathon and realizing how great the people of Boston are.
Well, David, thank you so much for joining me. Always a pleasure. Best wishes, of course, but nothing personal, and looking forward to the next time we chat. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Have a great day.